Hello everyone, my name is Bakshi Puneet and I am a second year medical student. Today we will discuss about eye and ear examination. Hello, I am a second year medical student. What is your name?
My name is Kiran Bakshi.
Do you have difficulty in vision?
No,
Have you had trouble in your eyes?
no.
Okay. First, we will check visual acuity. To test the acuity of central vision, use a well lit Snellen eye chart, if possible. Position the patient 20 feet from the chart. Patient who wear glasses other than for reading should put them on. Ask the patient to cover one eye with a card to prevent looking through the fingers and to read the smallest line of print possible. A patient who cannot read the largest letter should be positioned closer to the chart. Note the intervening distance. Identify the smallest line of print where the patient can identify more than half the letters. Visual acuity is expressed as two numbers. Example, in my case, what I observed is 20/20. The first indicates the distance of the patient from the chart, and the second the distance at which a normal eye can read the letter. If the patient cannot read the largest letters, test their ability to count your upraised fingers and distinguish light, such as your flashlight, from the dark. Next test we will do to identify the visual fields by confrontation. Confrontation testing of the visual field is a valuable screening technique for detection of lesions in the anterior and posterior visual pathway. There are two tests in the visual field by confrontation. First is static finger wiggle test and the other one is kinetic red target test. First, we will perform static finger wiggle test. Position yourself about an arm's length away from the patient. Close one eye and have the patient cover the opposite eye while staring at your open eye. So, for example, when the patient covers the left eye, to test the visual field of the patient's right eye, you should cover your right eye to mimic the patient's field of view. Place your hands about 2 feet apart out of the patient's view, roughly lateral to the patient's ear. While in this position, wiggle your finger and slowly bring your moving fingers forward into the patient's center of view. Ask the patient to tell you as soon as he or she sees your finger movement. Test each clock hour or at least each quadrant. Test each eye individually and record the extent of visits in each area. Note any abnormal field cuts. Next test we will do kinetic red target test. Facing the patient, move a 5 mm red topped pin inward from beyond the boundary of each quadrant along a line bisecting the horizontal and vertical medians. Ask the patient when the pin first appears to be red. Now we will inspect the position and alignment of the eyes, study in front of the patient and survey the eyes for position and alignment. If one or both eyes seem to protrude, assess them from the above. Eyebrows. Inspect the eyebrows, noting their fullness, hair distribution, and any scaliness of the underlying disease. Eyelids. Note the position of the lids in relation to the eyeball. Inspect for the width of the palpebral fissures, edema of the lids, color of the lids, lesions, condition and direction of the eyelashes. Lacrimal apparatus. Briefly inspect the region of lacrimal gland and lacrimal sac for swelling. Look for excessive tearing or dryness of the eye. Assessment of dryness may require special testing by an ophthalmoscope. To inspect the conjunctiva and sclera, ask the patient to look up as you depress both lower eyelids with your thumb, exposing the sclera and conjunctiva. Inspect the sclera and palpebral conjunctiva for color. Note the vascular pattern against the white scleral background. The slight vascularity of the sclera is normal and present in most people. If you need a fuller view of the eye, rest your thumb and finger on the bones of the cheek and brow respectively and spread the lid. Ask the patient to look to each side and down. This technique gives you a good view of the sclera and bulbar conjunctiva, but not of the palpebral conjunctiva of the upper lid. For this, you need to invert the lid. For inspecting cornea and lens, with oblique lighting, inspect the cornea of each eye for opacities. Note any opacities in the lens that may be visible through the pupil. For inspecting iris, at the same time inspect each iris. The marking should be clearly defined with your light shining directly from the temporal side. Look for a concentric shadow on the medial side of the iris. Because the iris is normally fairly flat and forms a relatively open angle with the cornea, this lighting casts no shadow and the person's iris be normal. Examine the pupils. First, we will do the light reaction test. In dim light, test the pupillary reaction to light. Ask the patient to look into the distance and shine a bright light obliquely into each pupil in turn. Both the distance gaze and oblique lighting helps to prevent a near reaction. Look for the direct reaction, which is the pupillary constriction in the same eye, and the consensual reaction, which is the pupillary constriction in the opposite eye. Always darken the room and use a bright light before deciding that a light reaction is abnormal or absent. Second test for the pupil is the near reaction test. If the reaction to light is impaired or questionable, test the near reaction in both the dim and normal light. Testing one eye at a time makes it easier to concentrate on pupillary responses without the distraction of the extraocular muscles. Hold your finger or pencil about 10 cm from the patient's eye. Ask the patient to look alternatively at it and into the distance directly behind it. Watch for the pupillary constriction with near effort and convergence of the eye. The third component of the near reaction, accommodation of the lens that brings the near object into focus, is not visible. In my examination, I find out that the light reaction and the near reaction causes pupils to constrict. Hence, the pupil found to be normal. Now we will inspect extraocular muscles. Standing about 2 feet directly in front of the patient, shine a light into the patient's eye and ask the patient to look at it. Inspect the light reflection in the corneas. They should be visible slightly nasal to the center of the pupil. Now to test for the 6 extraocular muscles, ask the patient to follow your finger or pencil as you sweep through the 6 cardinal directions of gaze, making the wide H in the air. Lead the patient's gaze to the patient's extreme right, to the right and upward, and down to the right, then without pausing in the middle, to the extreme left, to the left and upward, and down to the left. Pause during upward and lateral gaze to detect nystagmus, which is a fine rhythmic oscillations of the eyes. If you suspect lid lag or hyperthyroidism, ask the patient to follow your finger again as you move it slowly from up to down in the midline. The upper eyelid should overlap the iris slightly throughout these movements. The posterior part of the eye, which is called optic fundus, is visible through ophthalmoscope. Through ophthalmoscope, we can see retina, choroid, retinal vessels, optic nerve. Optic nerve and the retinal vessels enters the posterior portion of the eyeball through optic disc, is visible through ophthalmoscope. Hello, I am a second year medical student. What is your name?
My name is Kiran Bakshi.
Do you have any problem in hearing?
No,
Have you had any trouble in your hearing?
no.
Okay. First, we start with the auricle. Inspect the auricle and surrounding tissue for deformities, lumps, or skin lesions. If ear pain, discharge, or inflammation is present, move the auricle up and down, press the tragus, and press firmly just behind the ear. Movement of the auricle and tragus is painful in acute otitis externa but not in otitis media. Tenderness behind the ear occurs in otitis media. Next, we will examine ear canal and drum. To see the ear canal and drum, use an otoscope with the largest ear speculum that inserts easily into the canal. Position the patient's head so that you can see comfortably through the otoscope. To straighten the ear canal, grasp the auricle firmly but gently and pull it upward, backward, and slightly away from the head. Now insert the speculum gently into the ear canal, directing it somewhat down and forward and through the hair, if any. Non-tender nodular swelling covered by normal skin deep in the ear canals suggests exostosis. These are non-malignant overgrowths which may obscure the drum. Inspect the ear canal, noting any discharge, foreign bodies, redness of the skin or swelling, cerumen which varies in color and consistency from yellow and flaky to brown, and sticky or even to dark and hard may wholly or partly obscure your view. In acute otitis externa, the canal is often swollen, narrowed, moist, and pale, and may be tender. It may be reddened. Inspect the eardrum, noting its color and contour. The cone of light, usually easy to see, helps to orient us. Identify the handle of malleus, noting its position, and inspect the short process of the malleus. Gently move the speculum so that you can see as much of the drum as possible, including the pars flaccida superiorly and the margins of the pars tensa. Look for any perforations. The anterior and inferior margins of the drum may be obscured by the curving wall of the ear canal. Next, we will do whispered voice test, which is used to test auditory acuity. To begin screening, ask the patient, do you feel you have a hearing loss or difficulty hearing? If the patient reports hearing loss, proceed to the whispered voice test. Stand 2 feet behind the seated patient so that the patient cannot read your lips. Occlude the non-test ear with a finger and gently rub the tragus in a circular motion to prevent transfer of sound to the non-test ear. Exhale a full breath before whispering to ensure a quiet voice. Whisper a combination of 3 letters and numbers such as 3U1. Use a different number letter combination for the other ear. If the patient repeats initial sequence correctly, or the patient repeats at least 3 out of the possible 6 numbers and letters correctly, that means the person has normal hearing. If the person repeats 4 out of the 6 possible numbers and letters as incorrect, that means the person has abnormal hearing. Now we will do testing for conductive versus neurosensory hearing loss, which is done by tuning fork test. For patients failing the whispered voice test, the Weber and Rene fork test may help determine if the hearing loss is conductive or sensorineural in origin. To conduct these tests, make sure the room is quiet and use a tuning fork for 512 Hz. These frequencies basically fall within the range of conversational speech. Set the fork into light vibration by briskly stroking it between the thumb and index finger or by tapping it on your forearm just in front of your elbow. First, we will do Weber test, which is the test for lateralization. Place the base of the lightly vibrating tuning fork firmly on the top of the patient's head or on the mid-forehead. Ask whether the patient hears the sound on one side or both sides. Normally, the vibration is heard in the midline or equally in both ears. If nothing is heard, try again, pressing the fork more firmly on the head. Restrict this test to patient with unilateral hearing loss, since the patient with normal hearing may lateralizes and the patient with bilateral conductive or sensorineural deficits will not lateralize. In unilateral conductive hearing loss, sound is heard to the impaired ear, and in the unilateral sensorineural hearing loss, sound is heard in the good ear. Next is Rinne test, which is used to compare air conduction and bone conduction. Place the base of a lightly vibrating tuning fork on the mastoid bone behind the ear and level with the canal. When the patient can no longer hear the sound, quickly place the fork close to the ear canal and ask if the patient hears a vibration. Here, the U of the fork should face forward, which maximizes sound transmission for the patient. Normally, the sound is heard longer through air than the bone. In conductive hearing loss, sound is heard through a bone as long as or longer than as it is through air. In sensorineural hearing loss, sound is heard longer through air than bone.